Hi there, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're tuning in. My name is Tom Peacock Nazil. I am the founder and CEO of an ocean cleanup organization based in Singapore called Seven Clean Seas. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's set to be an interesting session, looking at a few topics that people often don't associate with ocean conservation, and that is, of course, plastic neutrality. And the reason we are looking at this is because it is, of course, Plastic Free July. And at Seven Clean Seas, we have put our own little twist on this great month of the year, calling it Plastic Neutral July. I'm sure you see what we did there. And the reason is because we intend and we are building an ocean cleanup portfolio of projects that are entirely funded through an innovative funding mechanism that relates entirely to plastic neutrality. Now, before I jump in and introduce who will be our keynote talker today and also our panelists, I'll give you a quick introduction to Seven Clean Seas and the work we're doing. Bear with me a second, I will share my screen. Uh-oh. I knew there would be a tech issue. Just got to allow screen sharing. It was going so well. Can anyone help me? Bear with us, people. Sorry about this. My laptop does not want to allow us to share my screen.
I'm not too sure. Is this on?
I think Trish is.
Screen.
Trish, there we go. Can you go full screen, please, Trish? There we go. All right, so I'm not sharing this, so it'll be a little bit clunky. Sorry about that. Let's try this again. So if you could just go to the next slide, please, Trish. We are Seven Clean Seas. We're an ocean cleanup organization, as you already know. We're a certified social enterprise, both here in Singapore, certified by Raise SG, but also in the UK by Social Enterprise UK. And we recently won two separate awards that we are very proud about. The first was the British Chamber of Commerce Sustainability Champion of the Year Award 2020. And most recently, the United Nations World Tourism Organization Global Startup Champion for this year. And that was focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water. So we're absolutely thrilled to have won these awards. Next slide, please. To date, I'm happy to share that we have recovered over 174,000 kilograms of plastic directly from the marine environment, and we are just getting started. We've actually decided to set ourselves some very ambitious goals. Next slide, please. And those goals are to recover 10 million kilograms of ocean plastic across the 7 worst plastic polluting countries, all while simultaneously formalizing the employment of 200 informal waste workers. Now, as of the 2015 Jembeck et al. Scientific paper, which is extremely highly regarded within this sector, the list of the 7 top plastic polluting countries are in the bottom left corner. And I'm going to talk you through 2 of the projects that we've got going on right now. And again, there we go. The first is and was a very ambitious project, one that I'm happy to share has very much come to fruition. This scientific research suggests that over 70% of ocean plastic actually originates from rivers. So if we want to genuinely make the biggest impact we can quickly from plastic flowing into the rivers, then a good place to focus is exactly And I'm live again. Wow, it's a good job that we're in the business of cleaning oceans and not tech. Trish, if you want to stop sharing, I can now share my screen apparently. So I shall do this. Sorry everybody for the technical hitches. Of course, it always happens when you're live, not in the warm up, but we will get straight back to it. So where were we? I believe it was here. As I was saying, the scientific literature has indicated that 70% of the ocean plastic is originating from rivers. So if we want to make the biggest impact we can quickly, this is a good place to focus when we're talking about downstream interception and collection. We've developed a system alongside funding partners from Marina Bay Sands, Howden Group Holdings, Eka Family Foundation, and most recently BW LPG as well, that will operate completely on solar and wind power and have the capability of recovering 1.5 million kilograms of plastic per annum, which is truly an enormous amount of plastic pollution. The second project we have going on is in Indonesia. There is a beautiful archipelago called the Riau Archipelago, which is technically a remote island location. It's home to one of Indonesia's largest marine protected areas, standing at 1.2 million hectares. And we realized when the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, that they were going to be extremely negatively affected from unemployment due to the fact that they're so heavily reliant on the tourism sector. So we employed 22 people alongside our partners, Nicoy and Chempedek Islands, and they have been doing a fantastic job. To date, they've recovered over 100 tons of marine plastic pollution from this marine protected area location. And it's just the beginning. We're actually scaling up the project with the help of Microsoft to build the region's first waste management for plastic, which is a materials recovery facility where we'll be able to bring back the plastic we collect, source it for recyclables, but also take plastic directly from coastal communities, businesses, and some of the actual communities that still live on the water, which is quite amazing, sort that plastic through for recycling and really facilitate that for the first time. So at 7 Clean Seas, we're really focusing on building some amazing projects that create huge levels of impact all around ocean conservation, specifically looking at plastic pollution. But of course, these things are not free. And one of the biggest issues we have, and I'm sure everybody else looking to make a change in this world will have, is always going to be around funding. I think it's fair to say that no matter whether you're trying to decarbonize the atmosphere or clean the oceans as we are, how we achieve that funding and then deploy it is going to be the key to our success. So at 7 Clean Seas, we decided to start here. Why don't we start at the funding element? And back in 2018, we developed a funding mechanism which is truly scalable, that allows us to generate capital and then deploy that capital across a multitude of different projects, from nearshore cleanup projects, river cleanup projects, waste management infrastructure to stop plastic leaking into the marine environment in the first place. And of course, when we're working in these locations, empowerment of communities is really key at the same time. So providing jobs, formalized jobs at fair working rate, at fair living wages with safe working environments is really core to everything we do. And that funding mechanism is plastic offsetting. And of course, that's what we're here to talk about today with plastic neutrality. So plastic offsetting is a mechanism for companies to achieve plastic neutrality. Companies can offset their plastic consumption by weight against the physical recovery or interception of waste plastic from the natural environment. The vehicle to achieve this is through the purchase of plastic credits. So we build projects that recover plastic from the natural environment or intercept it from ever getting there. This action generates a creditable moment, and then we can sell those plastic credits to businesses to help them achieve plastic neutrality. Businesses can really look at their necessary plastic footprints and make improvements, but we get the funding we so rightly need to invest in more projects and to create bigger impact year on year. A definition of plastic neutrality would be that for each kilogram of plastic used by a particular company, an equivalent weight of plastic waste is recovered or diverted from the environment through recycling projects, waste management projects, or the purchase of plastic credits. And really the process isn't that complicated. A plastic credit, which is equivalent of 1,000 kilograms of plastic that has been diverted or recovered from the natural environment, is generated when one of our projects collects 1,000 kilograms of plastic from the marine environment or intercepts it from ever getting there. Of course, this plastic has to be additional to the baseline, and that plastic still needs to be processed for recycling and circular secondary purposes. But because we've generated this credit, we can then sell this credit to clients who are looking to achieve plastic neutrality through the sale of a plastic credit certificate from 7 Clean Seas, and most notably recently from third-party certification bodies as well. But there is an element of avoiding greenwashing that I want to talk about because it is very important. Offsetting on its own without looking at measurement or reduction is always going to be looked at as a potential opportunity for greenwashers to simply offset instead of make improvements. And this is why our best practice at 7 Clean Seas really involves 3 separate stages. The first is the measurement, so plastic footprint analysis. And we've made investments within our environmental engineering team to be able to actually work with organizations like The Economist and like City Development Limited and many others to help them actually analyze their plastic waste footprints. Off the back of gathering this data and generating this data for our clients, we then need to look at reduction. How do we take you from a starting point that we've measured? How do we reduce all of your unnecessary plastics until we get to a place where you only have, by definition, kind of necessary plastics left in your supply chain and products? Once we've identified this necessary level of plastic, which we hope will not be necessary for long, but until technology and alternatives catch up, what we can look at is then offsetting as the third and final element of this jigsaw puzzle. So it's very important that we start with measurement, then we look to reduce before we then do look at offsetting, of course. And I'm happy to share that there are some international plastic credit certifications now available on the market. When we started this 3 years ago, really nobody had heard of plastic neutrality or plastic offsets, let alone plastic credits. And nobody was looking at certifications for such. Now, there are 2 standout organizations who are really focusing on this. Verra, one of the world's biggest certification bodies for carbon credits, has now developed a standard looking at plastic as well and how they can work with large organizations like FMCGs to help them neutralize their plastic leakage. And this can be through the purchase of waste collection credits or waste recycling credits. And then separately to that, Zero Plastic Oceans, a much smaller certification body, but focusing a lot more on plastic with the specific frame of the ocean. So how do we certify plastic that is ocean-bound plastic from a recycling perspective, but also how do we work with organizations and programs and projects to look at ocean-bound plastic sub-programs? So essentially, our projects could become certified under the Zero Plastic Oceans certification to certify that it is all ocean-bound plastic that has been collected. So it's great to see movement in this space. This is just the beginning. Hopefully we see these certifications develop as the years go on and become more robust until we're at a point where we can genuinely have a plethora of solutions depending on the projects that are generating the plastic credits. Now, before we get too far into that, I just need to stop sharing my screen. Bear with me a moment. Backstage. Oh, there I go again. I'm back. Okay, so before we go into more details of that, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker today, Maggie Lee. She's the lead for the plastic program at Vera. She's really at the forefront of the work that they're doing in this space. And yeah, it's a pre-recorded 30-minute presentation. So if you do have any questions, I will do my best to answer them on her behalf. But I'm going to hand over to this recording now and see you afterwards for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Maggie Lee. I'm usually based somewhere very close by in Southeast Asia, but today I am joining you from Vancouver, Canada. So it's a bit far, but of course, my heart is still with my work in Southeast Asia. So thank you so much for joining this event, and thanks to the organizers, 7 Clean Seas, for inviting me. Just like a very quick background about myself, so you know why I'm actually here speaking with you today, is that I've always been very fond of environmental work. Even when I was working in the private sector, I've been working for manufacturers, the biggest ones of all, household personal care, and also food manufacturing. And I've also worked for quite a few retailers. And these retailers, supermarkets, have been quite well known in Southeast Asia and in Hong Kong and Taiwan. So just like to give you some context about why the plastic problem is very interesting and also pertinent to my work. So since my time in the private sector, I've always seen how much plastic that would go out with our products, be it from manufacturing point of view or retailer point of view. Because even at the retailer level, we do have to also rebundle and sometimes repackage some of the goods. We put something that's called secondary packaging on top of what the manufacturers have already sent us. Rarely do we dismantle and take out packaging. We usually just put more at the retailer level. So throughout the plastic value chain, there's quite a lot of influence coming from different businesses and also different stakeholders. Sometimes because of regulatory reasons, we put more packaging because there may be linguistic requirements for the label. So here in Canada, it's a bilingual country, and packaging must have both English and French labels. And so similarly in Malaysia, and also similarly in different parts of Southeast Asia, there would be different linguistic requirements that may actually warrant the manufacturer or the retailer, and sometimes the distributors, to put extra packaging to make sure that they're in satisfaction of that requirement. And so the reason why I'm talking about this with you today is that I've seen the sheer amount of plastic packaging that actually is associated with not just our region in Southeast Asia alone, but also in different other regions. You may know that we already have a very big plastic pandemic aside from the COVID-19 pandemic. It is definitely no joke because we've always been aware that what goes up must go down. It must come down. We know that whatever we produce, it will go out into nature, and somebody will still have to deal with it. So for the longest time, when I was in the research and development of one of the manufacturers I used to work for, I always wondered if the company actually has any type of communications with the waste treatment management companies, and also with the governments that are digesting the volumes of all this packaging. One would think that because some of these products that I mentioned would sometimes go down the drain, go down the bathtub, or go down in the toilets or the garbage chute or recycling bins at best, they would have some sort of an agreement, right? And so I found out the hard way that this agreement does not exist. Manufacturers can actually produce quite a lot of products without having coordinated with the waste treatment agencies and authorities. And so that's also why I started thinking that, so what happens with this? Can we recycle all this packaging? If I buy a packaging or buy a product that's actually wrapped in plastics, can I just recycle them so that it goes back into the loop, so we call, so that it's not a take, make, dispose pattern, but that my contributions in washing and gathering and also putting out my recycling into the proper disposal bins can actually facilitate recycling as an industry, right? That was a trick question because, as we know, there is a very big problem with what's going on with the recycling industry lately. From 2018, there has been quite a lot of influence in the in the plastic waste industry. After China, the country that used to process the most waste plastics, closed their door on accepting more waste plastics, the entire market landscape has changed. So you may remember that a few years back in Southeast Asia, quite a few national and also ministerial leaders have already very vocally refused to take waste plastic from the Western world. We have actually shipped back containers full of waste back to their origin. And sometimes this waste, unfortunately, still lingered on in Southeast Asia. You may see in the mountains or in a remote region, mountains of plastic waste. And when you take a look closely at them, at the fine print, this plastic may not even come from the region. It may bear the labels, the linguistic requirements that I mentioned from another place. And so that is when I realized that the system is quite sick. There's got to be something that we could do about rekindling this momentum that causes the plastic market to work in a circular way. And of course, we're still very far away from that, but we can't actually produce a silver bullet right away that actually cures all. And because we have been doing so in the past, and that previous cure-all is called plastic. People thought that they could actually eliminate the usage of glass and usage of paper to salvage the environment by using plastic, which is a disposable item. And of course, plastic is actually much better than that. It's actually a very durable. It is a it's very strength in terms of tensile strength. It's strong in terms of being a barrier to water and oil and gases. And so as a previous scientist working in manufacturing, we think plastic is a great packaging material, but unfortunately its durability is actually its Achilles heel at the moment as well. What we really loved about plastic is now what's hurting the environment. Plastics just wouldn't go away. So what are we going to do with all this waste plastic out there? And manufacturers who are saying that we want to actually adopt recycled plastic, but the quality of it, also the pricing of it, is just not feasible at all. So coming from both ends, now that I am a full-time environmental organization worker and also a previous employee at the UNEP and WWF, I understand from both sides why the manufacturers and why the environmental communities are in outrage. They're just very serious about tackling this problem. But unfortunately, there's really no very streamlined approach in sight that could actually stop the production of waste plastics. And so that's also why today I'd like to share with you something that we've been working on. So from this point on, I'm representing my organization, Verra, which is an NGO that is based in Washington, D.C. with staff all over the world right now, with myself based usually in Bangkok, Thailand. So let me just quickly share my screen with you to show you what Verra is all about and what kinds of solutions we're proposing. So first off, this is actually quite a mouthful in terms of what it is. It's an investment in plastic waste collection and recycling projects to achieve net circularity. And note that net is a very important word here. So what Verra is, in a nutshell, is that it is a nonprofit organization. As mentioned, it is based in Washington, D.C., USA. It has quite a few other projects that were launched before the plastic standard. So we are the baby standard. We're the newest one. The Verra standards, the most well-known one is actually the verified carbon standard. So carbon credits is actually a core product to what Verra has been working on. And we now have over 1,600 projects registered with Verra, and there are more than 25 project types. And I'll talk to you about projects in a bit. So Vera, along with other organizations such as manufacturers and other NGOs, and also even auditors, we came together, and all of these organizations came together to form something that's called the Triple R Initiative. The Triple R Initiative, as you can see in the right side of this slideshow, is actually the cross-sectoral, multi-stakeholder organization that was put together to tackle the plastic waste problem. And so, as I mentioned, we know that recycling itself is not going to save the day. So how are we going to actually move the market? So the Triple R Initiative put together this guideline, and it's called the Guideline for Corporate Plastic Stewardship. Together, it came up with theories such as this one that you see right here on the screen, that total footprint. As you know, footprint actually comes from almost like carbon footprint. You may know of this from carbon footprint, is how much you consume in terms of something in particular. For this case, of course, we're talking about plastics. The total footprint, so against what most people believe, is actually not just your deliberate usage or your deliberate consumption of plastic. Plastic use is definitely one of them, and it's actually making up the majority of your footprint. But there's also leakage now. We know that no matter how good waste management systems are, there would always be leakage because nothing is perfect. Even if one single plastic bag gets blown away in the wind, that plastic bag has a high chance of landing in nature and staying there. And so that's also why at this point, we know that no matter how good the waste disposal systems are, we must always budget in for the leakage and understand how this would impact the environment. Next, we have mitigation activities. I will go through in detail with you later in my slideshow. Mitigation activities include quite a lot of different things that we can do. And a lot of these actually lie in the value chain, which is actually what the company or the manufacturer has total control of. They can say, for example, we want to make our bottles bigger so that the plastic that's needed to confine a certain amount of product is less. Or they can say that we're switching to another type of plastic or another type of material. So this type of activity we call mitigation activity, and a lot of it lies within their control. Next to that is actually plastic credits, and I will talk more about how plastic credits can help manufacturers and also help the communities in a bit. And in dotted lines you see here is actually extended producer responsibility. So what extended producer responsibility is sometimes we call it EPR, is now what's hailed by many environmental organizations as a customizable approach for policies. It could be voluntary or it could be mandatory for the companies to participate in, but this is actually a malleable approach that could actually be applied for any market or any geography out there. Many of the Western world countries have already adopted extended producer responsibility. And through many years, they've already perfected their own way of dealing with these EPR schemes. In Southeast Asia, where we're at right now, we are having quite a few extended producer responsibility schemes that are coming. And so we're definitely very excited and looking forward to how they would look like and how they would mold this plastic scene. And with total footprint plus mitigation activities, we have something that's called the leadership claim or leadership commitments. I prefer the word commitment a little bit more because it does sound like these manufacturers are very interested and dedicated to make these claims reality. So you see 3 claims here. They all start with the word net. I won't go into detail about what these claims mean, but in short, these 3 claims all contribute to the overall circularity of their plastic value chain, meaning that they will impose changes to their actions, to their processes, to ensure that they're closer to net circularity than before. They could also work on their leakage. They could work on their plastic use by eliminating unnecessary plastic by having different mitigation activities, or they can also invest beyond their value chain by looking into plastic credits. I will talk more about how that would be done in a bit. So earlier, I just mentioned plastic mitigation hierarchy. This is something that is very important. And as a person who used to work for the research and development of manufacturers and also retailers, there's so much that we can do. So I always love the example of the hotel toothbrush. when you stay in a hotel for more than one day, you usually use more than one tube of toothpaste. Let's say you're staying for 3 nights and that you finish your toothpaste maybe on the second day already, you probably would require a new one. And you ask the hotel for a new one, or maybe it's already replenished automatically by your housekeeper. But usually these dental kits are always bundled with a toothbrush, meaning that no matter how much you only need one toothpaste or one tube of toothpaste, the toothbrush is always just there. You always just need to consume it as well. You're not able to actually leave the clean toothbrush behind for the next person because it's already used, because it's open. So this is actually a call for redesign. If we actually understand how things are bundled and how things are consumed, maybe we can actually, throughout the convenience of the housekeeper, actually each time replenishing one item, being the bundled dental kit, instead they could also just replace the toothpaste instead of everything. So this type of redesign is actually built into the early parts of research and development for a product. And we highly advocate for this type of action to be taken by everybody. Next, we have the increase of recycled content of products. This is definitely going to be one of the most solid ways to support the recycling industry, because as you buy more recycled materials, that actually makes sure that more need or more demand for recycling will be there in the next step. So when we look at, for example, our products, let's say it's a bottle of chocolate syrup, or if it is a bottle of detergent, usually it's packaged in plastics. We try to recycle them, and that if the manufacturers have the ability to incorporate more recycled content back into their product packaging next time around, that is somewhat of circularity right there. We also know that there are hurdles, because I've once worked in the food manufacturing industry as well. Food contact material will require a very high level of stringency in terms of how clean they are, how much impurity there is, and also some bacterial count. There's quite a lot of measurements that are taking place before that material can be deemed as food safe or food grade. So that's also another reason why sometimes recycled content cannot go back into what they were once. And that's also why circularity cannot happen in that form, which is the best form. But in any way possible, we encourage manufacturers to increase the recycled content wherever is legal and feasible to do so. And at the bottom of this pyramid, we see two beyond value chain investments. They're both increasing collection in recycling, and also just increasing the collection of waste plastic in general. These two are sometimes not the focus of manufacturers at this point. They're mostly focusing on what they could fully control inside their value chain. And so this, we're suggesting that there's a very good way to do so. And now this is where plastic credit comes in. So for more details of the guidelines for corporate plastic stewardship, Verra does not own this guideline. So the current contacts would be Salpol and Qantas, and I'm hoping that the event organizers will share with you the link so that you could contact the folks if you have any questions or any issues with applying these guidelines. They're free for all, and they're available on public domain. And now, long and behold, of course, we were talking a lot about plastic credits. So how's plastic credits coming in, and how is this interesting to us all? And most of all, how is this part of the solution? Verra came up with what you see on the screen here is called the Plastic Waste Reduction Standard. We sometimes shorten it as Plastic Standard. So there are quite a lot of objectives and benefits of the plastic standard. We understand that there's just so much going on there with the collection of plastics. There's all the way from the voluntary beach cleanup to massive collections that are done by government agencies and also intergovernmental organizations alike. And so we know that to support the scale up of activities, there are a few things that we need to watch out. We need to first enable a robust impact assessment that is comparable and transparent in reporting. We need to know what happened. Is it really what you claimed? And secondly, we do need to address this social risks. We know that here in Southeast Asia, a lot of the work done for waste picking is actually by the informal sector. There are quite a lot of communities that are now focusing on the retrieval or the collection of plastic waste. So we do need to actually ensure their welfare is being taken care of if we're having a standard for this. And of course, we do want to enable that the project portfolio and prioritization investments. This actually is a key here, because when we are a manufacturer and we're looking to invest beyond our value chain, we do need to actually make sure that this is all done in a framework that is already robust and very stringent. And next, we also need to make sure that this really does drive recycling. As mentioned, recycling was in a bad shape because there was just no way of us ensuring that that recycled material can go back into circulation. And so recyclers are also discouraged from recycling more because the demand was low. So we need to make sure that our standard actually facilitates that. And I'd just like to go straight into how the plastic credits would help. So this is actually a schematic diagram that shows you what plastic credits really are. Using the plastic standards, projects are signified by the diagram on the left with someone pushing a cart with waste plastics. So these projects are collecting plastic waste from the environment. These projects can account for the plastic waste collect or recycle in line with social and environmental safeguards. If that collected and recycled plastic is additional, meaning that it's better than the status quo, it is out now elevating the amount that is recycled or collected from nature than before, then the project can generate plastic credits. There are two types of credits in this program: the waste collection credits and the waste recycling credits, to indicate the outcome for which credits are issued. As you see here, there are two arcs, and I will talk about them individually. So those credits can then be used by corporates, meaning the manufacturers, retailers, hotels, and any type of businesses that are looking at their plastic footprint to meet their net zero plastic leakage or net circular plastic or similar commitments, the ones that I mentioned earlier. This diagram illustrates the financial and material flows that occur within a project using the plastic standard. In this example, the project is the collection of plastic waste from the environment. So as you see here on the top yellow arc. So the waste that is collected and deemed non-recyclable is sent to a responsibility managed landfill, meaning that it's actually kept inside a managed facility instead of having the possibility of being leaked out into the environment. So they're doing the environment a favor by keeping this non-recyclable plastic. Unfortunately, it's not deemed recyclable, but out of nature. Therefore, they generate waste collection credits. And for the waste that is responsibly disposed of, the project received these credits automatically from the Verra registry. Then these credits can be sold to a company that is looking to address their plastic leakage and ensure the same amount of plastic put on the market is being recovered. So the bottom yellow arc is actually the other type of credit that I was mentioning. The plastic waste that is recyclable is sorted by material type and sent to a recycling facility. For the waste that is recycled, meaning that it's being taken by a recycling facility or a factory that is actually going to chop these up or actually using whatever recycling methodology to recycle the plastic, the project then receive a waste recycling credit and potentially waste collection credits too, if the source of the material is actually in nature or in places that are not considered to be proper waste disposal places. If the waste would have been sent to a landfill or a managed end destination, then the project would only receive the waste recycling credits, but not the waste collection credits. You see, these two credits are not hinged on one another, but certain projects can actually be eligible for both when they actually take back waste plastic from nature and take them to recycling. So purchasing waste collection and recycling credits is a form of investment made by a company in the management infrastructure that is needed to ensure their products stay out of the environment and in the circular value chain. And why is this important in general, and why should we even trust that this is going to be a workable solution? Is that we do have quite a few quality assurance principles here, 7 as you see. We know that this waste plastic collected must be real, meaning that it is actually a physical tonnage that is being retrieved from the environment or being recycled. They must be measurable. They have to have a very close measurement to what they actually are at the point when they're recycled and at the point when they're collected. They must be additional. As I mentioned, it must be better than the status quo, meaning that they have an improvement. They created an improvement in the local communities in terms of having recycled or having collected the waste plastics. So it also must be conservatively estimated, that we are estimating to have the right tonnage, and that we're budgeting in the same types of effort to ensure that it is actually the matching what's being estimated. And also, most importantly, it must be independently audited. As one would do for financials, the plastic and these numbers must be also audited by a third party that's accredited to be an auditor. So this is also why the plastic standard is very stringent. It's because we do have this one step of having mandatory audits. And uniquely numbered, meaning that these plastic credits, they're uniquely numbered to prevent double counting, to prevent double selling, that when these plastic credits are generated, they could only be sold once and to the buyer. And of course, at last, it is transparent. The Verra registry is on public domain. It could be accessible to anybody in the world. So all in all, is that these concepts, the accounting methodologies that I've mentioned earlier, how to actually calculate your footprint, having your deliberate usage, and also the accidental leakage factored in, and also the independent auditing step, which allows for a third party that is a professional in auditing to review and verify that the math is correct, that you are actually collecting that much plastic from nature. And also the registry system that is transparent and that has gone through a public consultation and it is available to all, is actually the core concepts that keeps this plastic waste reduction standard relevant and part of the solution. You may already be asking, so where can I find the methodology or this plastic standard that you're talking about? So all of it is, of course, on public domain. It is available on Verra's website. It is free for all to use. And there are quite a lot of pages of it. And of course, we do recommend that if you are interested in having plastic credits as part of your strategies in achieving net circularity, or if you're interested in waste collection and also recycling, you may want to look into these methodologies and the standards. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me using any of the emails you see here. Thank you very much for your patience, and I'll hand the time back to the organizers.
And that was also a fantastic deep dive into the certifications that they have created, really leading the way on circularity for manufacturers. So very big scale opportunities that they're looking at. And it's really a case of mobilizing that corporate capital to really fill a gap in investment, which has created a lack of waste management infrastructure or plastic recycling infrastructure all over the world, which is one of the main contributing factors to why we have oceans filled with plastic today. So anything we can do to generate more capital from the people producing the plastic waste and funnel that over to projects and locations that need it is nothing but a good thing. Yeah, great work from Verra. So as we move forward, I will introduce the panel and we'll get started with this panel discussion. At the end, we'll address some of the questions. I did see that some people have already brought up questions. Now, of course, Maggie will not be able to answer them, but I can give them a good go. We do work in this space quite heavily as well, and we will address them at the end. But for now, I would love to introduce our panelists for the panel discussion around plastic neutrality, July, of course, and plastic credits. So first of all, a client of Seven Clean Seas, somebody and an organization which we've had a fantastic relationship with for a long time. Hayley Langston from Howden Group Holdings. They're a large UK insurance company. And yes, they're an insurance company and they are looking at plastic neutrality. How are you doing, Hayley?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. Minus the technical issues, but I think we've got over that now. So things are running a little bit smoother. I'll just introduce your fellow panelists before we get stuck in. The second panelist who will be joining Hayley today is tuning in all the way from Berlin. Her name is Lena. She is representing Einhorn Products. They are, of course, a plastic neutral, or they have plastic neutral packaging within their products. Hi, Lena. How are you doing?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
No, I'm good. It just wouldn't be complete without more technical issues today, so don't worry about it at all. And then the third and final panelist who will be joining us today is tuning in from Singapore. She's an absolute leader in the space of sustainability. Her name is Esther Ann. She works for City Developments Limited. Hi there, Esther.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you loud and clear.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good stuff. It's so great to have you all here joining us today, celebrating Plastic Free July in our own little kind of fashion, switching it up to, we've lost Esther, switching it up to Plastic Neutral July. But we've got some questions for you. So I'm going to start with Howden and Hayley, if that's okay. Hayley, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and maybe kind of the organization and really kind of explain why you wanted to tackle plastic pollution at Howden.
Sure. So, hi everyone. As Tom says, I'm Hayley. I work for Howden Group. I'm based in the UK now, but I was up until about 2 months ago. I was in Singapore, so that's sort of I'm one of the people who started the conversation with Seven Clean Seas and helped to sort of get it off the ground from Singapore. And now I'm back in the sort of the group part of the company, the parent company in London. So in terms of where these conversations started, why we wanted to tackle the plastic problem at Howden, as Tom said, we're an insurance broker. We're not producing a product. We're not the typical organization, I guess, that you would expect to be at the beginning of the journey of companies looking into plastic neutrality and all of that. But I think it's probably easy as a sort of professional services organization to think, right, well, let's park this problem. It's not ours. It's the manufacturers. It's the construction companies. It's all of those who are creating a lot of plastic through the business that they do, and forget about the fact that if you're a large organization, you've got lots of employees and you've probably got a good platform to start raising awareness around the problem. So we've sort of looked at it from that perspective. We've got 8,500 employees across 45 countries worldwide. And we've started our journey from an employee engagement angle, and really sort of taken baby steps. So the first conversation with Tom actually was sat in a cafe in Singapore. We just wanted somebody to help us with the beach cleanup. We wanted an employee engagement activity around our group charity week. And we wanted to go and clean a beach, and we wanted someone to help us do that. And it's hard not to be inspired by what Seven Clean Seas have been doing, and think, right, we need to be doing something about this ourselves. So it sort of started from there. We, as Tom said, we have our foundation is a funding partner for the River Plastic Recovery System. So that's really started getting people interested internally, wanting to know more about what we're doing, and something very tangible. And something very cool and something different for people to go and sort of tell their friends about, I work for an insurance company, but look at all the cool stuff we're doing. Insurance is very exciting, by the way, for anyone who thinks it isn't. It's extremely exciting. So we've gained momentum from that sense, and then the next step with that was looking into the plastic neutrality, and it was sort of the beginning of the journey there.
So you mentioned 45 countries just then. I mean, that is an insane amount of kind of countries to be overseeing, particularly on a project such as this. How are you really approaching this as a global company when we're looking at plastic as an action point?
Yeah, and I guess another point to mention about the fact that we're in 45 countries is that we also run a really decentralized, sort of locally empowered model. So those 45 countries each run themselves. We don't have, so the part of the company that I work in is the group headquarters, but we don't set policies, and we set some policies, but as a rule, we tend to be led bottom up rather than top down. So we really have sort of, our approach has been on employee engagement and the ethos that sort of action drives action. So rather than going, let's all spend a load of time thinking about all of the data and measurement and all of that stuff that we need to do in the first instance, let's do some stuff, show people internally that we're committed to it, get management on board, get employees on board, get it as something that people are talking about internally, and then it sort of leads on from there. So we've had sort of pockets of good waste reduction activity going on around the company for some time, but it's really, as I say, been driven by the level of awareness in each of the local teams rather than something that's been driven top down. And so what we wanted to do, and what we've been working with 7 Clean Seas on, is coming up with an approach that's globally coordinated but adaptable depending on where each office is along its along the sort of plastic reduction and awareness journey. And as I say, plastic offsetting is a relatively new part of that discussion. We've been working with 7 Clean Seas both on the funding partnership on the river plastic recovery system, but also on educational webinars. We've done what we've called the one bag challenge. So getting our employees to go and collect a bag of litter, and sponsoring 7 Clean Seas to remove the same amount from the oceans, plastic from the oceans. And so that we, as I say, it's all been about engagement. It's all been about getting people interested and not trying to get the parts of the business that aren't on board yet to do anything that they don't want to do, but work with the ones that are engaged. Work on. So we're doing. We've started with our plastic offsetting. We've started on estimations for last year. So this year we'll offset the amount of plastic or estimated amount of plastic that our workforce has generated for 2020. And then we'll move to doing more of the data-led offsetting in the future. So we'll work with pilot offices first, those that are really engaged, come up with a methodology using the expertise of 7 Clean Seas, and then replicate that as we gain more engagement as we go across the other countries. So we're really not, as I say, it's not policy first, it's action first, get people involved, get people interested, and then that will follow. And what a little anecdote that I think probably quite a good example of this is when I put forward the proposal of doing the plastic offsetting to our sustainability committee, our group chief operating officer, who's obviously a really important stakeholder in this conversation, she said, wow, this is brilliant. This is something that I can go home and tell my kids about, and they're going to be really excited that this is something that I'm doing at work. As I say, insurance is very exciting, but her kids weren't that excited about what she'd say they'd do in what she said that she would do in her day job normally. So we're getting some interest. We're not trying to, what's the expression, eat the elephant whole. We're trying to do it bite by bite.
Yeah, I'm sure the insurance industry is more fun than you make out there, Hayley.
It's very fun.
I have loved our engagement from the very beginning, because it hasn't just been about, it's not transactional. This is not just about understanding your plastic footprint and then acting on that, whether that's a reduction first, of course, and then obviously an offset thereafter. But it's also been about education. Like, how can we get the people, those 8,500 staff and employees really engaged and passionate about the issue of plastic reduction and just sustainability in general. So I think it's been a huge success so far, and I'm really excited to see how things progress on that front.
Me too.
But yeah, so let's switch over from the insurance industry to a very different industry, over to Einhorn Products in Berlin. Now I'm joined here with Lena, and I've got to say, for everybody that's not familiar with Einhorn, it's one of the organizations that is truly an inspiration to me as we build our own organization, because they just do so much for the environment and so much for their staff and employees. that it really is kind of showing how a business can operate in the best possible way. Now, Lena, I'd love you to explain to everybody about all the work you're doing, not just in plastic, but just across the board in terms of being a fair, sustainable organization, and maybe even just explain to people what a fair, sustainable organization is.
Yeah, I'm happy to. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I think it's super great that you're doing this panel, and I already made so many notes during the presentation from Maggie. So thank you for that. Yeah, for those who don't know Einhorn is a retailer that sells condoms and period products. And we started up as a startup company, I think 6 years ago. And back then we only sold condoms. And what we do is, like, we started with the company setup that we reinvested 50% of our products back into the supply chain. So we supported projects for sustainability and social projects. And our goal was to make a very, very sustainable condom. And we actually finally achieved that, because now we sell condoms that are made from 100% regenerative rubber. So that was a long mission, but we finally did it. And we also shared the supply chain, and other companies joined us. And out of that, like a initiative started, a regenerative rubber initiative. And we are like a purpose-driven company. So we also, the company owns itself. So no one can take out the profits. So like the people who work for Einhorn kind of do the decisions, what we're going to do with the company. And yeah, fair sustainability is one big part of it. So it means fair and sustainable. And it's actually like the sustainability team. But as it was from the beginning, one big part of the company, it is always like, it's very woven into the company and the things that we do. And I think the fair sustainability teams acts on different levels, because I think Maggie also mentioned the pattern, the take, make, dispose pattern. So we sell condoms and period products, which are mostly single-use products. So on the product and packaging level, we try to achieve like constant improvement in terms of the packaging and the product itself. So look at the materials and see how can we reduce plastic, how can we reduce like product components that are actually not even needed, you know? So always like challenging the product and the packaging itself, and ask it, like, is it really necessary? Because I mean, these are hygiene or products that are needed and that need kind of packaging in terms of safety. So condoms need like a barrier, that was Maggie also mentioning. But we also act on a more systemic level, I would say, because we always ask ourselves, like, how can companies operate in a sustainable way? And like, what does this mean for like entrenched concepts as growth? So last week we had a big workshop about growth, and we're asking ourselves, do we want to grow? And if we want to grow, how are we going to do that? If we want to be sustainable, you know, like a keyword, donut economy. I don't know if anybody heard of that, but yeah, we are like now, it's always interesting, and the fair sustainability team gives much impact or like input for these discussions. So yeah, that's about Einhorn. And my responsibility at the fair sustainability team is for the product development of the period products and the packaging. But I kind of took over the topic. So yeah.
No, it's been great working with you, Lena. I think I've learned so much more than I ever thought I would do in terms of just how a business can be run with the staff and the people and the planet really at its core function. So I take my hat off to Einhorn. And a lot of people don't realize, but Einhorn were actually our first ever plastic offsetting client in the summer of 2018. And if it wasn't for Einhorn, we may not even have a plastic offsetting industry at the moment. So it's a lot of kudos there. Very early movers, seeing the importance in acting on plastic. Now, moving on from Germany to here in Singapore. Now, if you don't know Esther Ann, she is an absolute powerhouse in the sustainability landscape internationally, heading up City Development Limited, which is a organization that has really contributed and committed to contributing a enormous amount to the pursuit of sustainability, not just now, but in the future as well. Hi there, Esther, how are you doing?
Very good, Tom. Thank you for having me. And just heard these two ladies, much younger ladies who started the journey, recently. And I have to, I don't want to call myself old, but it's just that we started the journey almost 26 years ago. It's frightening, right? Yeah, so I think just for those who may not know City Developments Limited well, or CDL in short, we are actually based in Singapore. We started our business in 1963 with only 8 employees, and today we are operating in 29 countries and regions. Our core business is we build homes. We also build commercial property as a landlord, and we also have a footprint of 150 over hotels worldwide. And in addition, we have a fund management, division now that we also invest in startup and innovations and prop tech and all that. And in fact, well, our journey started with, because building is actually our bread and butter. So green building has always been our top priority. How do we design, build, and manage our property with conservation in mind? That has been our ethos for the past 26 years. And our strategy is one that we have to, the 4 pillars that we look at is how do we integrate ESG into, ESG is environment, social, and governance, into our business, integrate it into our corporate structure. And the second pillar is also an I, also innovation, integration, innovation. And the third one is investment. And the last one is impact. So what we deliver is decarbonization is the top priority. And for those who may not know the impact of building sector, we are accounting for about 40% of greenhouse gas emission worldwide. So decarbonization is really the top priority for us. And digitalization, innovation is very important. Without it, we can't move the needle. And of course, last but not least, to disclose and share, communicate the impact, whether positive or negative impact. So I've talked so much about the green building and all that. And what is really the end goals that we are looking at is we have actually pledged to World Green Building Council net zero carbon building commitment 2 months ago. So we are working towards it as a pathway for us to work towards a net zero built environment for buildings that is under our direct control. And thanks to our commitment to innovation, we opened the access to quite a lot of young innovator, and Tom being one of those that I'm really very happy to have met in the recent months. And after one meeting, I was already very impressed with what he has done. So we actually feature him twice, one in our virtual event on the regional innovator. The other one is actually the last month we have a World City Summit, and Tom was actually was one of the 7 innovator based in Singapore that we feature, and it impressed a lot of audience from the world on what he has started, and to look at reducing plastic waste. And what we have actually joined force and engaged Tom to do is actually to certify, to achieve this, what do we call it, the Tampines Concourse, one of our commercial property, to be plastic neutral. And we have actually gone through some audit process, and this will be hopefully to set the benchmark for commercial property here to carbon, it's like carbon neutralizing our property. We want to also plastic neutralize it, engaging our tenants and also, the site staff to look at the whole life cycle. How do we reduce the use of plastic, and how do we look at recycling them, and also, getting credits to offset it. But I think we have to look at the whole life cycle, not just buying credits to offset it, but also looking at how to reduce it and how to recycle it. So still very early day in the plastic neutrality, but I think it is always good to at least start first, and then hopefully we can step up. And I think it is very important to make sure that we reduce plastic, from going to the landfill, and at the end, from going to the ocean. And we also understand that 80% of the plastic waste in the oceans are actually from land. So as developer, although we don't have direct, activities in the sea, but we do have, responsibility to prevent, producing waste that go to the ocean. Yeah. So, well, I hope this is a short story, yeah.
No, you're doing some fantastic work, some really good work. And for you to now branch out and look beyond your main focus, which is carbon, to start looking at circularity and at plastic is enormous as well. If you think about just how many businesses and buildings there are in this world, all of which usually would generate some level of plastic waste, there is a huge amount of good that can be gained from building owners really taking charge of this situation. As Esther alluded to, there was a process of plastic auditing and then data analysis that had to go on before we could even look at this project. And that quite literally meant Ben, my co-founder, and myself stood in after work on a Friday, sifting through the waste of one specific building to see exactly what's in there and do all the data analysis. And yeah, it's not as glamorous as it sounds, but very important data that we've gathered off the back of that. And I am excited to be able to achieve the world's first plastic neutral building with CDL here in Singapore, of course, where we are based as well. Now, we have heard from three very, very different companies, but they all have one thing in common, and that is the fact that they have looked at plastic as another area of potential impact when it comes to sustainability. They've wanted to make a difference. And because of their actions, they have partnered with 7 Clean Seas in various different capacities, which has enabled us to generate capital, which we have directly funded ocean cleanup with. The aim of the game for all of us needs to be about bridging the funding gap. And what do I mean by the funding gap? Well, in many less developed locations around this world, there has been massive development over the last half century. But quite often what we've seen in these same locations is that investment into core infrastructure, such as waste management, has not been able to keep pace. And as a result, we have huge metropolitan areas and also rural and island locations all around the world producing lots of plastic waste, which inevitably doesn't have a way to be processed safely and sustainably, thus will end up in the natural environment. That's when it ends up getting washed into waterways and eventually into our oceans, where it creates the huge issues that we see all around us, particularly in the news and on TV. So it's without kind of partnering up with organizations looking to tackle their plastic footprints in very different ways from 3 very different organizations, we simply wouldn't be able to generate the capital we need to not just clean the ocean, but to build infrastructure to physically stop plastic leaking into the environment in the first place. That's one thing we're focusing on in Indonesia with the project in the Riau Archipelago. It's so important that we transition away from simply cleaning up through to physically building infrastructure to capture plastics and to sort and segregate those plastics so that we can unleash their value through recyclability and through recycling. One thing Maggie stated very clearly on her talk was that plastics are inherently riddled with issues when it comes to recyclability, and a lot of what we collect still will not be recyclable. And that is when we have to get very innovative and find other solutions for handling that plastic in the most sustainable way possible. Now, of course, nobody should offset in lieu of actual making reductions themselves. And at 7 Clean Seas, we invested heavily in our sustainability department to enable us to work with organizations, as we're doing with CDL here in Singapore, and of course with our other partners on the call as well, to physically do that analysis, get that data, and then we know where we're starting. We know how much plastic's been used, where it's been used, what its classification is, what a diversion rate is, and then how can we improve upon that by taking that data and making real commitments and not just commitments, but real obligations to move the needle in the right direction, to move away from virgin plastic consumption, period. But there is a reality that the world that we live in today is not ready to just get rid of plastic overnight. And this is where the challenge comes in. But what we can do is turn that challenge into a strength. You know, on one hand, we know organizations are struggling to get down to zero plastic consumption for various reasons. Otherwise, one of the biggest ones often stated is unintended consequences of alternatives being heavier. For example, if you're shipping something around the world in plastic, it might actually be lighter, thus generate less greenhouse gas emissions than a glass alternative. So there is, from a life cycle perspective, an argument for plastic in many different cases. And we can use these companies, we can work with them who still use it because it's the best option they have to date, but feel bad about it and want to try and neutralize and compensate their plastic usage by investing in projects in locations where plastic leakage is enormously high, and investment into waste management infrastructure and collection operations is almost non-existent. And that's really where the win-win comes in. Organizations get to make a major win from a sustainability perspective, because when they hit that level of reduction that they just can't bust below, they can then look at purchasing credits through our plastic recovery operations. And that is really when we start to look at the onboarding of those 2 billion people who don't have access to waste management. And that's really when we'll solve the problem. So huge things going on, 3 very impressive organizations. I've got a couple of last questions before we start to wrap up. We've still got some time, so I'm going to keep you here as long as possible. This is just going out to everybody, I guess. So whoever wants to answer this one, what are the challenges that you've faced with plastic waste in general for your company? So just not even recycling, just the generation of plastic waste. What are your biggest struggles? I'm going to throw that then at Lena, because I know you're going to have a good answer for this.
Yeah, good question. I think for us a big challenge is actually, I mean, as you mentioned, we sometimes are not able to use better alternatives to plastic. But for us, this is not, this is not the end of the story. So we want to achieve that. And for us, I think it's really hard to implement, if we have better solutions, those into the supply chain, because we are a small company and we therefore have smaller purchase quantities. So we often hear, okay, if you want this kind of material, then you would have to order like this amount of films, and then we have like products for the next 20 years or something. And of course, I mean, it is not only our manufacturer, but they have to have the same discussions with their pre-suppliers. And so it's a big, long chain of discussions talking about like better alternatives and trying to convince the other party to, not use their normal material, which works fine, and have the extra effort to implement a new material. And I think this is a big challenge for us. And we find ourselves having discussions about 10 more or less % of the recycled content. And then we wonder, like, how is this even, why are we having those conversations? And for us, it's just a big challenge to always ask again and ask again, do you have something else? What's there? What about this? What about that? But I think it's a job that we have to do because others don't do that. So, yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully, if enough collective organizations start to pressure their supply chains, those producers will build capacity because they'll realize that there's a business opportunity there. So keep going, keep pushing on.
Yeah.
Okay, next question, and this is open for everybody again. I think both Haley and Esther may have a good answer for this, but what are you doing in terms of plastic waste, but not just plastic waste, all waste in general, beyond offsetting? So when we're thinking about reduction targets, education, procurement strategies, things like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can give it a shot. In the building sector, of course, construction waste is the big ticket item. So I think in Singapore, the recycling for construction waste is very high, over 99%. And plastic only account for about 4% of overall construction waste. But what we are looking at is not just construction, but also look at our tenants, our shoppers who actually generate, plastic waste and all. And of course, we also want to look for alternatives. Before alternatives are found, we want to probably, look at how to change their behavior, their mindset and all that. But this is a much bigger than, landscape than a company can do. So packaging is something that under the Singapore Green Plan, the government is actually looking into it already. But right now it's a little bit challenging because of the delivery and all that during COVID especially. So unfortunately, packaging is something that it may not be easy to, to reduce it for now for safety reason and all. But I think circularity is something that we find as a most, probably have the biggest potential. And Tom, you probably have remembered that sharing your panel with World City Summit that we are looking at turning plastic waste into building materials, into sand. And if we could, we are doing pilot testing. If we are successful, we can actually solve two problems in one solution. That is, reducing plastic waste and also looking at alternative, building materials as well. So I think we need to keep our option open, looking at not just one stage of the whole life cycle, and see how we can find solution. Circularity is something that I will bet on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to need a whole suite of solutions. Everybody, a lot of people may mistakenly think that all plastic is traditionally recyclable, and what we find is that so often is not the case. And then what do we do with this residual plastic waste that we can't recycle even with all the infrastructure in the world? And that's when people are looking at using it for alternative uses, like in building material, like in pyrolysis, turning it into fuel again, or chemical recycling in some situations. That's just on the cusp of kind of its journey, I think, in development. And over the next 5 years, hopefully chemical recycling becomes a big player for the more unrecyclable plastics. What I would say to everybody, of course, let's start with designing products that are recyclable, using polymers that are easy to recycle, so that we can at least maximize the chances of that plastic not becoming waste and actually being recycled. So yeah, lots of work to do on that front. You're doing quite a lot, actually. Hayley, I'm going to tweak the question for you because of the nature of kind of having just so many staff in so many different locations. I know one thing you looked at whilst you were here in Singapore before you left to the UK was kind of trying to encourage your fellow employees and colleagues to make reductions in their own consumption habits in the offices whilst they're working at work. And I'd just love to hear about your experience and some of the wins and maybe some of the challenges that you found with trying to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think so. As you say, we're not looking at this from a product perspective. We're not looking. We don't. It's in theory it should be easier for us because we're just looking at what we do ourselves. But as I said before, we all of our offices are the sort of procurement departments and everything. Yes, there's connection amongst them, and where it makes sense, we all work together. But I think it's the main thing for us is education. And it's helping people to understand both in their working capacity. So whether you work in a procurement department or in any other, in IT or any space that you're actually having to purchase products for the use of employees or for business use, that we really understand what we should be looking at. And the point you made about alternatives not always being better, really understanding that we're making sure we're making conscious choices and educated choices. And then on the flip side, with our employees in their own sort of personal life, obviously we've been doing things like giving people reusable bottles and reusable cups for in the office, and taking out. We've got an in-house cafe in our London headquarters. We've taken out all single-use plastic from that. So we've got the challenge of COVID at the moment that's brought back some plastic that we wouldn't have otherwise had. But we're very, very consciously looking at the balance of health and safety and the things that we need to do to be keeping our employees safe and well, and also making sure that we're not losing sight of what we're doing in that sense. But it's really for us, I think it's education and awareness. The talks that you guys have been doing, we've seen off the back of that more people coming to our sustainability team and others to ask what they can be doing. When we had you in, imagine having someone into the office to talk a few months ago, the questions and the engagement that you got, it just keeps going higher and higher. And I think the more people are talking about it, the more people are thinking about it, the more we're moving in the right direction and getting that crucial buy-in to be able to be doing the little bit more labor intensive side of the waste auditing and the data collection and all the stuff that is the less glamorous side of it, but we can't really move the dial on what we're doing unless we do all of that. But people need to be interested, engaged, to want to do all of that.
Of course, it's always going to be a challenge, I think, but it starts with education. People need to understand why they need to understand and why they need to make a change. So, yeah, it's been great working with you on a number of different educational fronts as well. And it's really why we keep that as a key focus, even though we're looking at high impact projects overseas and funding mechanisms to really scale that up. You know, if we stop doing education, then no one's going to know why we're doing it or why it's important. So keeping that at its core is key. I'm going to go over to the questions. We've only got a couple of questions from the audience. I think they were meant for Maggie, so I'm sorry, Maggie. I'm going to answer these on your behalf. I will start with Laurent. So this is a very good question, actually, and something that does need to be discussed when we are looking at the topic of plastic credits. Laurent's question is, the temptation of plastic waste credits is that it does not fundamentally coerce the powerful, especially the oil and gas, the plastics, the packaging intensive FMCGs, businesses, or even governments to change, redesign their core to become more eco-friendly and see recycling as a core rather than side feature of their strategy. What is our view on this? So I really think there's two different elements to this question that need unpacking. The first is that, you know, the purpose of a plastic credit, whether that's a collection credit or a recycling credit, is to really try and work with organizations to kind of find that once they've got down to that necessary level of plastic consumption is to neutralize that through other sources. Now, the way it works, and if we look at the market and we look at the prices involved on the market, like at the very low end, you're looking at around $500 a credit. On the top end, it can be several $1,000s per credit, and a credit is 1,000 kilograms. Remember, so it's extremely expensive when you're looking at this as an alternative to reduction. And one of the main features that I love about the plastic market, which I think really differentiates it from the carbon crediting market, is that whilst a carbon credit can be generated at quite a low cost because there's a high capex for a project, but that project may generate credits for a 25-year period with little to no intervention. Thus, it creates many, many credits and the overall cost can be quite competitive. Competitive with reduction in investment, which is obviously not the situation you want to be in, because then people will just buy credits instead of reducing. Now, when you're looking at a cost point of between $500 US and $2,000, $3,000 US, depending on who you're working with and what characteristics those credits have, it will always be cheaper to make reductions in the plastic that you are consuming and putting out there in the market than essentially having to front that cost per ton when we're talking tens of thousands of tons for FMCG companies. It simply isn't possible. And the beauty of that means that actually plastic credits maybe are not that relevant for the oil and gas or plastics packaging FMCG companies as a tool. And what they should be looking at is more regulatory, or what the government should be looking at is more regulatory action to work towards that. But it's the people that then purchase that plastic for various different uses, which is really where a crediting market can come in and benefit them. So I would first of all say there is an economic roadblock to allowing organizations to use it almost to greenwash. I think it's fair to say to greenwash. And then the second part of the question, which is infinitely important, is that we live in a world with 2 billion people don't have access to waste management. Now, often these 2 billion people live in locations, in towns, cities, and municipalities that don't have the available funds to actually build waste management to and capture that plastic and stop it leaking into the environment. A lot of this is due to rapid growth and kind of less developed locations and bad socioeconomic issues that hopefully are things we don't actually have to come face to face with in day-to-day life, because we're very fortunate. But these individuals don't have a choice. Nobody has got the money that is necessary to build the infrastructure required. So I would say plastic credits, on the flip side, create a really good opportunity to generate capital, which can then work with these communities and help them build the infrastructure they need to have bin men that come around and collect their plastic waste, to have a recycling plant in their municipality that will allow them. So I think it's not being used, and we would never sell any plastic credits to somebody that I thought would be abusing the system. But from our experience, everybody that we speak to, they're interested in reducing. And that's where the measurement and reduction comes in first. And only what they cannot reduce, they're looking at offsetting. And they're looking at offsetting, because it helps them achieve their plastic claims if they have them, and their sustainability targets, but also because they know that it's generating investment for these communities that are in dire need of it. You know, if we want to bring on 2 billion people onto waste management by 2040, that's like 500,000 a day. It's an enormous amount of investment that is needed, and we need all of the strategies available to humankind to generate that capital and deploy it. So I would always say that there will always be an opportunity for greenwashing in any sustainability market, and it is our duty as custodians of this market to make sure that we are working on best practices and publishing our position and the way it should be done to avoid that wherever possible. So I hope that answered your question, Laurent, but very good question and a challenging one that I thought I'd dig into. The only other one is, are plastic credits available at organizational level or even for individual level? Now, this is something that we have been asked quite a lot, and we never expected to have individuals wanting to be plastic neutral, but we are now actually working with a number of companies. There's a company in Singapore called Good Food Company. We're in talks with a major airline and also a food delivery company, because people want to be plastic neutral, you know, and they're talking about how can we structure plastic neutrality through the purchase of plastic credits to enable these tech solutions to become plastic neutral. So watch this space. It is changing quick, and hopefully we can give you some good news on the next call. I think it's fair to say that we are at the end of our time as well. It's been a fantastic opportunity to get all three of you together. I know you've never met before, and we've had a great relationship with you all independently. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you're role models to everybody else in your respective industries. And we look forward to having a long and prosperous relationship together, and most importantly, just creating a load of impact. Stopping plastic.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And for being so inspiring as well. As I said at the beginning, it's 7 Clean Seas that have sort of triggered our action here. So well done, thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think if we've learned one thing today, it's that we should stick to cleaning the oceans and not get into tech, because I managed to get kicked off this stream twice, but hopefully that didn't interrupt too badly.
Great.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much. If anybody
Thank
else
you.
has questions,
Bye-bye. Bye, ladies. Yeah, bye, Tom.
Bye,
Bye.
Esther.
See you guys. If anybody has any questions for us or for our fellow panelists, you can email hello@sevencleanseas.com. That's SEVENCLEANSEAS.com. My name is Tom Peacock, so just say, hi, Tom, I've got a question, and yeah, we'll help you out. But again, thanks so much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your evenings and days or wherever it is you are. And I look forward to next time we get together and talk about the impact that we've created.
Same here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.